This is lesson 1. I will investigate and use the formulas for area and perimeter of rectangles. In your math journal, I want you to go ahead and label today's date, lesson 1, area and perimeter, and then you're going to need a piece of graph paper before we go on. We're going to actually draw some things on our graph paper and glue it into our math journals today. I'm also going to give you a heads up that because this is the very first lesson in this module and we're talking about area and perimeter for the first time, this lesson may be a little bit longer than what you're used to. Okay, so the first thing I want you to do is on your grid paper, I want you to draw a rectangle that looks exactly like this one. I want it to be 4 units wide and 7 units long. After you trace this on your grid paper, I want you to count to make sure it's 4 rows wide and 7 rows long. Okay, once you've done that, I want you to come back. Okay, now that you've drawn your rectangle, I want you to take your pencil and I want you to begin at a vertices. I'm going to show you what a vertices is. So you're going to start, I'm going to actually use my highlighter pen, but you're going to start on the corner of this rectangle. Okay, this is called a vertices. And what I want you to do is I want you to trace all the way around your rectangle, like this. So you get, it's kind of hard to see, I know that's yellow, but you can see what I'm doing here. So trace all the way around the rectangle. Get back to where you started. So that's a little bit messy, but when you trace all the way around a rectangle, what do you call the measurement of the distance around a rectangle? Hopefully, said the perimeter. If you didn't, then you just learned a new word today. The perimeter is the distance around a rectangle, so that's what you just traced on your grid paper. Okay, we're going to trace that perimeter again, but this time as you trace, I want you to count the units as you trace them. So you will do something like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. Count as you trace all the way around. Okay. So what's the perimeter of the rectangle, or how many units did you count? Say 22 units. If you didn't get 22, go back and count again and see if you can see where your mistake was. Now, there has to be a quicker way to trace around this rectangle. I bet you know enough about perimeter to already have some ideas of how you can find the perimeter without tracing all the way around. If not, I'm going to teach you some ways. Okay? This time, I want you to take your pencil out and count all the squares inside your rectangle. These squares represent the area of the rectangle. So you're just going to count out the squares. So you would say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Keep going until you get all the way to the end. Okay? How many squares did you count? Or what is the area? The area is 28 square units. So the number of squares that fit inside a rectangle are the square units. Okay? Draw another rectangle on your graph paper, this time 3 units wide and 9 units long. And I want you to label the length and width of your rectangle. Now take a look at this. How can you find the perimeter? Now you could count all of the units around it like we did last time, or you could try this. We're going to trace around one length and one width like this. So we're going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So we traced 12 units around one length and one width. Oops. We traced 12 units around one length and one width. Now how does 12 relate to the length and the width of the rectangle? It's the sum, right? We added 3 and 9 together, and we got 12. So we have talked about, or you have thought to yourself, many different ways of finding the perimeter. And those different ways of finding the perimeter without tracing around the edges and counting are called formulas. You can do it by counting along the sides of a rectangle. You can say 3 plus 3 is 6, and 9 plus 9 is 18, and you can add those together. You could say 3 plus 9 is 12, and 3 plus 9 is 12, and you could add those together. There are several ways to find the perimeter of a rectangle. So in your math journal, I want you to create a chart that looks just like this one over here, and I want you to title it Formulas for Perimeter. And I want you to copy all 3 of these formulas. The L stands for length, and the W stands for width. Okay, so one formula for perimeter is to say length plus width plus length plus width. another formula for perimeter is 2 times the length plus 2 times the width. And another way to find the perimeter is to take the length plus the width, add them together, and then double that or multiply it by 2. So make sure that you copied this in your math journal on that page that you labeled for today. Okay, so let's take a look at this last problem that you drew on your graph paper. And we're going to practice using this formula. 2 times length plus width. So I already told you to find the length and the width. We did that already, and we found that 3 plus 9 was 12. So 3 plus 9 is 12. Well, I also know that this side is 3 and this side is 9. So if this is 12 and this is 12, then I can just take 12 times 2, which is 24. So that's one way to find the perimeter, 24 units. Right now, on your graph paper, I want you to draw a rectangle that's 2 units wide and 4 units long, just like the one that you see over here. And I want you to solve for the perimeter using this formula. 2 times length plus width. So you're going to say length plus width, you're going to add that together, and then you're going to double it. Then I want you to choose another one of these formulas and find the perimeter a different way. Then I want you to come back and we'll check your work. Okay? Now, this is an example of all 3 ways to find the perimeter. This is the first way that I told you before. I want you to take length plus width, which is 4 plus 2, which will give you 6. And I want you to multiply that by 2, and that'll give you 12. Okay? And then you were supposed to choose a different formula. So if you chose to do length plus length plus width, then you would have this one, 4 plus 2 plus 4 plus 2, which would be 6 plus 4, which is 10, plus 2, which equals 12. Or if you did 2 times length plus 2 times width, you'd have had 2 times 4, which is 8, plus 2 times 2, which is 4. Again, you still get 12. So what I want you to notice here is that there are at least 3 different ways to find the perimeter. You have to choose the way that you feel like is the most efficient. Okay? Last one that we're going to draw for perimeter. I want you to draw a rectangle that's 5 units wide and 6 units long. I want you to find the perimeter using the formula that I just mentioned. So again, you're going to find the length, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay? 5 units. And the width, which is 6 units. And you're going to add those together. So you're going to do 2 times length times width, which is 2 times 11. So 2 times 11 would be 22. Now I want you to choose one of these other formulas and find the perimeter that way. And then I want you to check back. I'm going to show you an example. There's 3 different ways to find the perimeter. You only had to do 2. I asked you to please use the first way, which is right here. This one together. And then if you chose to say 2 times length plus 2 times width, you would have had 12 plus 10, which would have got you 22. Or if you did length plus width plus length plus width, you would have had 6 plus 5 plus 6 plus 5. You notice they all get you to the same answer. Okay? Now we're going to shift gears for just a minute, and we're going to think about what if we were given the perimeter and we were given the length, or excuse me, the width, but we didn't know the length. Okay, so I want you to sketch this, and I actually want you to sketch this in your math journal. Okay, notice it doesn't have all the squares, just sketch this in your math journal. I did previously tell you that we were going to cut some things out and put it inside your math journal, but I think we won't do that. Go ahead and sketch this in your math journal, and I want you to label 5 units, X units. So when you think to yourself, if you knew that the perimeter of this was 26 units, okay, and you knew that this was 5 units, but you didn't know this, the length, how could you figure out the length? You could use any one of these formulas here. Okay? I want you to choose one of these formulas, the one that you like the best, and I want you to put 26 as the perimeter, and then I want you to fill in 5 units as the width and see if you can figure out length. If you can't, you can hang with me, or if you think you have an idea, go ahead and figure it out. Okay? There are several different ways to do this, but this is one way to do it. You could, if you were using 2 times length plus width, you could say, well, you know that 5 and 5 are the sides, and that would give me 10. Right? So I could take the perimeter, and I could subtract 10, which gives me 16. So I know that x plus x has to be 8, because there's 2 of these. So it would be 8 plus 8 is 16. Or you could take the perimeter and you could divide it by 2, which will give you 13. And then you would say to yourself, what plus 5 equals 13? Well, 13 minus 5 equals x, so x must equal 8. The important thing to think about here, and the problem and the issue that a lot of students have, is that they get to the 16 and they say, oh, the width is 16. Well, it can't be 16, because if it were 16, then this would be 16, and this would be 16. And 16 plus 16 plus 5 plus 5 does not equal 26. It equals 32. It equals 42. So you have to find half of 16. It's 8 and 8, because 8 plus 5 is 13, and 13 times 2 is 26. Okay? We're going to practice some more of those on our problem set. So if that's a little bit confusing to you, it's okay. We're going to practice some more. Okay, now let's switch gears for just a minute, and let's talk about the area. Okay? So if we knew that we had a rectangle that was 3 units wide and 9 units long, how could we find the area? We could go back and we could count every one of these squares like we did earlier. But obviously that would get kind of boring, right? Or it would take a really long time. You would get tired of counting. So I want you to think to yourself about what you know about area in the past, and how could you find the area of this rectangle without counting all of those boxes? Okay? Here's some strategies that you could use. You could count all the boxes. You could skip count. You could say 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 27. Or you could just simply multiply 9 times 3 equals 27. This would be another formula for area. When you take the length times width, it will give you square units. That's the formula for area. So in your math journal, I want you to write area. This says A. Above this, I want you to write in your math journal, I want you to write area. And I want you to write A equals L times W. Area equals length times width. So there's only one formula for area, where there are 3 different formulas for perimeter. But remember, you don't have to remember all those formulas for perimeter. You just find the one that works best for you, and that's the one that you can use. So we're going to do a problem similar to what we did with the perimeter. This time we're going to pretend that we know the area. And we know that this is 50 square centimeters, and we know that the length is 10, and we want to find the width. So think to yourself, how could you figure out what W is if you knew that area was 50 and the length was 10? Think of it this way, right? 50 equals 10 times blank. So how would we figure out what the blank is? We would know, if we know that 10 times 5 equals 50, then we know that the width is 5 centimeters. Now we're going to practice a little bit more. We're going to get out your problem set, and we're going to work on perimeter and area again. So first of all, you're going to notice that we have 2 rectangles. One rectangle, we have all the squares, and the other one that we don't. So there's a couple of ways that we could solve for the perimeter. We could count all the units all the way around the square. If we chose to do that, that would take a little while, and would choose to count the units for each side. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this is 7 units. And notice I keep saying units because we haven't determined if these are centimeters. They're definitely not inches. They're too small to be inches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And this is 9 units. So now you get to choose which formula you want to use to find the perimeter. Let's go ahead and do area first. 7 times 9 is 63, so area equals 63 square units. And this is the way that you can abbreviate square units. You can just put square, SQ, and then units. Now we'll get ready to do perimeter. Again, you can choose whichever formula you like best. I like to do 2 times length plus, this is like 2 plus. Let's try that again. Perimeter equals 2 times length plus 2 times 7 plus 9, which is 16. And I know 16 plus 16 is 32. So 2 times 16 equals 32. So the perimeter is 32. Try to do this one by yourself if you feel comfortable. If not, you can stay with me. If so, do it by yourself and come back just to check. All right, so I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 units. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 units here. So my area is going to be 9 times 6, which is 54 square units. It really pays to do your extra math, so you don't have to just sit and think about what that math problem is. Okay, and then perimeter. Again, I'm going to do 2 times length. That really is a W, or excuse me, an L plus W. So 9 plus 6 is 15. So 2 times 15 is 30. So my perimeter is 30 units. Now, here we don't have to do any counting, but we're still doing the exact same strategy. So, the perimeter, I'm going to do 2 times length times width. You can choose whatever formula you want to choose, but this is the one I'm going to use. So, 6 plus 5 is 11, and 11 times 2 is 22, so it's 22 units. And then area is 6 times 5, which is 30 square units. Okay, I want you to try to do these last couple by yourself here. Okay, now you'll notice that for A and B it's just asking for the perimeter, but for B it's asking for area and perimeter. I want you to check back. If you get stuck and you don't know what to do, you can always just press play and go along with me, but I want you to try to do it by yourself. All right, so perimeter, I have 8 plus 3, which is again 11. 11 times 2 is 22. 8 times 3 is 24, so 24 units. Got some big numbers here. All right, so I have 166 and 99. Because these numbers are a little bit bigger, I think I'm going to use a different strategy here. 99 is really close to 100. And I know 100 plus 166 is 266, but that's one too much. So I'm going to subtract 1, and that's going to give me 265. So the length and the width is 265. Now I could say times 2, but I'm just going to add 265 together because that's a little bit easier. That's going to give me 10, 13. It's going to be 530. So I've got 530. And this time I don't have to say units. I get to say meters because they actually gave me the units this time. Okay. All right, so for the next one, again, they've combined meters and centimeters, trying to see if you remember how to do your meters and centimeters. So I'm going to go ahead and change this to, I remember that there are 100 centimeters in a meter, so I'm going to go ahead and say that this is 150 centimeters plus 75 centimeters. You can kind of think of this as money, 150 cents and 75 cents. Might help you do this in your head. Be like 225 cents or 225 meters. I'm going to double that. Or you could say 4 meters, centimeters, or 450 centimeters. They would both be correct. This is where we're going to do a little bit of problem solving. For giving us the area, we've got to find the unknown length of the side. So 8 times something equals 80. So this would have to be 10 centimeters because 8 times 10 is 80. Try to do B by yourself. Think to yourself, 7 times what equals 49? And then check back. Say 7 centimeters? I bet you did. I always think it's easier to find the missing side and area, but it gets a little bit tougher when you do perimeter. Okay, so this time we know the perimeter. The perimeter is 120. I know that the width is 20, but I don't know the length. So I'm going to use this formula. Perimeter 2 times length plus width. I don't know why I have so much trouble writing that. All right, so the perimeter is 120. I know that 2 times 50 plus x equals 120, right? So I know that 20 and 20 would be 40. So I've got 120 minus 40 plus 2 times the length. So when I subtract this, that gives me 80 plus 80 equals 2 times the length. So I'm thinking to myself, 2 times what equals 80? And that would give me 40 centimeters. So I'm going to go back up here and I'm going to think to myself, does that make sense? If this was 40 centimeters, 20 plus 40 would be 60 centimeters. and 60 centimeters times 2 or doubled would be 120 centimeters. So I know that 40 centimeters would be correct. Okay, so let's try this one. Here we go. Now I'm going to find the perimeter of a square. So the perimeter of a square, again, is going to be, I know the perimeter is 1,000. I know that I've got 250 plus 250 meters. That's going to be 500. So I've got 500 meters plus 2 times the width. So that's going to be, when I subtract these two, I've got 1,000 minus 500 meters is going to equal 2 times the width. So that's 500 for the two sides here. So if I take half of that, that means that the width has to be equal to 250. So you might be thinking, well, that's kind of weird because they're exactly the same. But then when I go back and look at this shape and I think, does that make sense that all the sides are the same? Yes, because it's a square. Each of the following rectangles has whole number side lengths. Give the area and the perimeter. Find the length and so the perimeter is 20 centimeters, and we know the area is 24 square centimeters. So I'm thinking to myself, I have to come up with two numbers that when I multiply them together, it's 24, but it's still going to give me the perimeter of 20. So when I'm thinking of things that equal 24, I'm thinking, well, I know 12 times 2 equals 24. I know 24 times 1 equals 24. And I also know 8 times 3 equals 24. So just by looking at the rectangle, it doesn't look like 24 in 1 because it's not really long and skinny. But that doesn't always mean that that's right. But I'm going to try 12. Actually, I'm not. I think just by looking at the rectangle, I'm thinking, it looks like it could be 8 times 3. But again, looks can be deceiving, but I'm going to try that one first. Because 8 times 3 is 24. But now I want to see if that would give me a perimeter of 20. So if this were 8 and this were 3, 8 plus 3 is 11. And 11 times 2 would be 22. So that wouldn't work, would it? You know what? I just thought to myself that I left out thinking this. Machine, you forgot 6 times 4. I did, because 6 times 4 also equals. Let's try that. So if the length were 6 and the width were 4, that would give me an area of 24. So let's see if that gives me a perimeter of 20. Okay, so this is 6 and this is 4. So if I use the formula perimeter equals 2 times length plus width. Look at that, I did it right. Length plus width is 10, and 2 times 10 is 20. So the length and the width are 6 and 4, because 6 times 4 is 24, and 24 also gives me a perimeter of 20. Alright, so let's take a look at the other one. Thank goodness they gave us the same area. Now by looking at this one, it's kind of long and skinny. So maybe this one is the 12 times 2. Let's try it, see if that gives us a perimeter of 28. So I'm going to use that same formula. Perimeter equals 2 times length plus width. And let's see here. 12 plus 2 is 24, 14. So 2 times 14 does equal 28. So it is 12 and 2, actually. Okay? All right. So that'll be all for the set today. I want you to make sure that you do the practice and practice doing the area and perimeter before you do your exercise. Look, and remember, if the first practice isn't enough for you, you don't think you're going to be able to pass the exercise, go ahead and do the other practice too. And good luck to you.